Well, welcome to this week's session. And friends, we are halfway there. You guys are doing great. You're doing this. You're in it. I'm proud of you. Let's keep going on this awesome journey. So this week, we're actually doing something that I don't know if I've ever done. We're going to take an entire week to think about one verse. I'm sure you will have it memorized by the end. It is Micah 6:8, which says, "He has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? And it's this, to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." It's the acting justly part that I really wanted to study and think about and look into as my Black and brown brothers and sisters were sharing their experiences with me. And I was holding space for their stories, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, we are starved to participate in and experience justice. So let's talk about justice. Recently, I was taking my son on a trip to visit his cousins, and as we were driving, I was pulled over for speeding, and he thought it was hilarious that his mom was getting busted by the law, and yes, I had to pay a ticket. I think, though, when we think about justice, I think we often equate it to, not heeding the law correctly, and then thinking about the consequences related to when you break the law and the fine and all the things. It's a job we kind of just assign to the government or the people in charge, to law enforcement. Many of us, myself included, can lean away from the work of justice and kind of take a backseat to it and let, the bulk of the work be for others. Maybe we do this because we feel underqualified, we feel uncomfortable, maybe we feel apathetic to the idea of justice. But friends, listen, taking a back seat to justice, it really means that that's coming out of our starvation. Because when we walk away from the work of justice, we're walking away from something God designed. In fact, it's who He is. He is just, and He loves justice. We see over 200 times the idea of justice talked about, mentioned, beloved by God. And so I wanted to look at God's idea of justice this whole week. But I wanted to, right here, look at 3 verses that really speak to justice, all right? So Isaiah 61:8 says this, "For I, the Lord, love justice." He loves it. He says, "I hate robbery and wrongdoing. In my faithfulness, I will reward my people and make an everlasting covenant with them." And then Isaiah 1:17, this is what God says, "Learn to do right. Seek justice. Defend the oppressed. Take up the cause of the fatherless. Plead the case of the widow." And this last verse I want to point out is Psalm 89:14. "Righteousness and justice are the foundation of God's throne." His throne is built on righteousness and justice. And later we approach the throne of grace, right? So righteousness, justice, grace, this is the makeup of God's throne that he really reveals to us. But can we just get nerdy for a second and talk about that word for justice in the Hebrew? The Hebrew word for justice is this word called mishpat. Mishpat. And it actually has a couple layers to it. That first layer is the punishment of a crime based on what the person has done, regardless of race or social status, like punishment. But that second deeper layer, where it's really rooted and where God really talks about in the Bible, is that it's actually giving people their rights. That's mishpat, giving people their rights. In fact, only 10% of justice mentioned in the Bible is about acquitting or the punishment of wrongs. The other 90% is talking about proactive protection, compassionate care, giving people their rights, which blows my mind. That's a much more robust and beautiful picture of justice than I ever gave it, of this little court system on the earth here. But God is like, no, I want there to be proactive care and protection for especially those who are marginalized, who are oppressed, who have been pushed to the edges of society. So it's way more beautiful than I've ever seen it. So when we think beyond that layer of punishment to proactive care, I really see how our world is starved for that proactive care, for that justice. So many folks are marginalized, pushed to the edges, wanting the same pay or opportunity or privileges that other people have, starving for that proactive care. So what does that mean for us? For you and I? Well, we're going to explore it all this week, looking through the Bible and see what that says. But two things just right here today. Thing one, let's just stop and remember the great mishpat, the justice, the proactive care that we have in our life, and really reflect on that. Because spiritually, emotionally, personally, financially, there has been great proactive care given to us, and to stop and be grateful for that. The second thing is this: let's ask God, now what? God, when it comes to living out your justice, reflecting your character when it comes to justice, what should I do? What does this even look like? Where do I begin, right? Some of us might be lost in this. So we talk about it in this book, but Latasha Morrison talks about in Be the Bridge, she talks about 4 things: listen, learn, lament, leverage. Where should I go in this process? Here's the deal. What I know is that God is a God of the margins. He's a God of the margins. This is what I mean. He has always been seeking to protect and care for the vulnerable, the marginalized, the oppressed, the widow, the orphan, those who are lacking, those who are in need, those who have experienced oppression, sexism, racism, all kinds of isms. He says, hey, I want to protect you, and I want there to be proactive care for you. In fact, Leviticus, if we turn to Leviticus chapter 23, verse 22, look at what God says way back in the beginning. This is what he says to the Israelites. He says, listen, when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap to the very corners of your field. Don't reap to the edges, to the margins. Like, leave the edges and the margins, leave room. He says, don't gather the gleaning of your harvest. So if anything is left as you're harvesting, like left on the floor, leave it on the ground, leave it there. He says, leave it for the needy and the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. I think that's so beautiful. He is building that in to their crop system. Don't harvest to the edges. Leave some for those who are in need. He's the God of margins. And not only back in Leviticus, but then we see Jesus arrive, and he goes straight to the marginalized, to those who are sick, who are lame, who are blind. He goes to those who have leprosy, who are literally pushed to the edges of society. They're not allowed to participate. And he touches them, he heals them. He's a God of the margins, right? He gives people healing and help. Friends, may we consider the margins that we have in our life. What resources do I have? What goods do I have? What wealth, what time, what skills do I have? And how do my margins meet the needs of the world? And maybe that's something we can begin to pray about. God, how do you want me to take my margins and bless others, give those away, so that the privileges I have, everyone could have the privileges, the same privileges that you might have. Another verse that really speaks to me about this is Psalm 103, that says, know that the Lord is God. It is he who made us, and we are his. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. It's God who made us, not we ourselves. We feed off of his pasture. He has given us mishpat, justice, proactive protection, compassionate care. He's such a generous, just God, and we're asked to be generously just in his image as well. I think this is going to be a really great week as we dig into justice and how we are starved for it. I'm really grateful you're here. I will see you next time.